This week in the Georgia Strait, I did a very interesting real estate story, and it concerned the issue of deposits for condominiums, because in British Columbia, like in Asia, when you're buying a condominium before it's built, you put down a deposit, and then you move in and you're happy and you're in your dream home. This time, however, it didn't work out quite that way. It was an Iranian man, extremely wealthy, and he wanted to buy a $2.9 million condo in the Erickson, which is a luxury condominium development on the north shore of False Creek. And this is the area controlled by One West Holdings, which used to be known as the Concord Lands, because this area was bought by Li Ka-shing after the World's Fair in 1986. So it's on the north shore of False Creek, $2.9 million condominium, and this man puts down a deposit of $745,000. This is in 2005. Well, what happens is the condo is supposed to be completed by 2010. And then what happens in 2008 is there's a global meltdown in the real estate markets. Prices drop, and the condo, when it finally becomes available to him, he says he doesn't have the money at the time, because he was in Iran, to pay the rest of the $2.2 million that he owed the company. So he said he had a car accident in Iran, he was in a hospital, he couldn't get the financing, and then what happened was the developer said that the deal was over and was going to keep the deposit, $745,000. He wasn't happy about that. He went to BC Supreme Court to have the contract declared void so that he could get his money back. He lost in BC Supreme Court, and then he went to the BC Court of Appeal. That's the highest court in British Columbia. Above that is only the Supreme Court of Canada. Well, this week the BC Court of Appeal came down with a decision and said the contract is valid, the developer had the right to keep the deposit, so he's out $745,000 because he didn't pay the balance. And what the court ruled is when you put down a real estate deposit, you have made an agreement, and it's very difficult to get your money back once you have made that deposit. So this was a significant legal ruling, and it's something that anyone who's buying real estate should be aware of. Once you put down the deposit, you're basically into the deal unless there's a special circumstance that arises. Another story we have in the Georgia Strait concerns Van City. Van City is a credit union. It's the largest financial institution in British Columbia with a head office in BC, $17 billion in assets. It's still much smaller than the chartered banks like RBC, Bank of Montreal, and CIBC, but it's a big financial player. So what happens with credit unions in British Columbia is the members, the people who have money in the credit union, can actually elect the board of directors. So they're having an election for the board of directors of Van City, but one of the issues that's happened is the board has recommended certain candidates. So there are 5 of the candidates that they've put a sign on the ballot that goes out that they're recommended. Well, the other 5 candidates who are not recommended are not happy about this, and some other people are not happy about this. But Van City defends the practice because they say that they want to get the very best board of directors that they can have. So they've put the recommendations. This has been going on for 3 years. Some of the people who were on the board last year, the board that made recommendations, are now running for re-election, and they are recommended. One of them being a well-known newspaper writer named Alan Garr. So this has been a fun story for us to cover. We cover the Van City elections on an annual basis because they elect 3 directors, and so that's one of the stories we have. Another story, and this is going to be one of the biggest stories in Canada, is the election of the Liberal Party leader. And I've talked about this before on WOW TV. It's expected that Justin Trudeau this weekend will be elected as the leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. He's doing very well in the polls. And even this week, there was some talk in the media that Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister, may not even run for re-election in 2015. Stephen Harper was first elected Prime Minister in 2006, but Justin Trudeau is doing so well that some people are wondering what this means for the future of the government. and also the NDP, which is the second party in Parliament. After the 2011 election, the Conservatives won with Stephen Harper. Second place was the NDP with Jack Layton, and third place was the Liberals with Michael Ignatieff. What's happened is now the Liberals have moved past the NDP and are competing with the Conservatives in the polls. So Justin Trudeau's a young guy, 41 years old, good looking, comes across very well, he's articulate, speaks English, speaks French very well. And his father was Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau, from 1968 to 1984. There was one brief period when he lost an election, 1979, but he was back in office in 1980. And Pierre Trudeau is one of the most famous Canadian prime ministers in history. So now his son is getting ready to become leader of the Liberal Party, and many people think that he has a very good chance of becoming the next prime minister. What I find interesting about this story is if the polls suggest that Stephen Harper is in trouble, and it's too early right now, we're only 2013, but if by 2015 that he's not doing very well and he does step down, it raises some very intriguing questions about the future of the Conservative Party, because there's many people who are in cabinet that people might look at as potential leaders. One of them is Jason Kenney, who's the Citizenship and Immigration Minister, and he's a Calgary MP. Another could be James Moore, who's the Senior Minister from BC, and James Moore is the Member of Parliament for Port Moody, Coquitlam, and Port Coquitlam. And a third one could be Peter MacKay, who's the Defence Minister, and he's a Nova Scotia Member of Parliament. Peter MacKay's wife is actually from Vancouver. Her name is Nazanin Afshinjam, and she was Miss Canada, and she was a runner-up in the Miss World competition, which was actually held in China. So Peter MacKay's wife had a high profile in China. So this is what's happening at the national political level right now. At the municipal level, we've seen also the left-wing party, COPE, in Vancouver. They had a board of directors election recently, and this time they want to run a candidate against the mayor, Gregor Robertson. In the last two elections, the party COPE has cooperated with Vision Vancouver, which is the mayor's party, to run a joint slate. So they didn't run anyone against Gregor Robertson. Now they're planning on running a candidate against Gregor Robertson in 2014. So this has created a little bit of uncertainty in municipal politics. Provincially, the big story is the provincial election, which is on May 14th. The province of British Columbia probably has the most power. It has control over things like education, healthcare, natural resources. So it's the most important election, actually, for people in British Columbia. The NDP is leading in the polls. It's the more slightly left-wing party, but not that left-wing. Its leader, Adrian Dix, announced a fiscal plan. He was going to increase corporate taxes by 1% from 11% to 12%, and also increase taxes on high-income earners. So people who are earning more than $150,000 a year will pay more tax if the NDP is elected. But apart from that, he isn't planning huge changes, but in certain areas, his number one issue is skills training. So he wants to do a lot more in the area of educating people for the workforce, which takes us back to our original story about the temporary foreign workers. We're bringing workers into Canada because we don't have enough skills in Canada, and I think Adrian Dix wants to address that. So he's going to be taxing a little bit more from the corporations and the wealthier people, and then applying those taxes to training young people for the new economy. And for WOW TV, I'm Charlie Smith, editor of the Georgia Straight, and thanks for being with me.
感谢收看今天的大温故事，我们下期再见。